Welcome into Attacking Third. We have a little bit of breaking news. Christine Cupo here. I am joined by our editorial colleague, Pardeep Cattry, and she's got a little bit of news about NWSL going on today. Pardeep, what is going on?
The NWSL has applied to US Soccer to form a Division II league, which they're likening to a version of minor league baseball. It'll look like a reserve league that is focused on having a path from the youth game to the professional levels.
Now, this isn't official yet, but the application is in. This is pretty massive, though, right, for the women's side of the game. In contrast to what's already pre-existing for the men's divisions, both I'd say first division, second division, the way that they have established themselves, the fact that they have homegrowns, with the alleviation of the NWSL draft in recent seasons. How big of a leap is this for women's soccer to finally take in the US?
Oh my gosh, I think it's a massive leap, like you basically lined out there. I think anybody who's watched professional sports, be it soccer or other sports, knows that there needs to be that pipeline somewhere. Um, but women's soccer and women's sports, because of historic underinvestment, haven't had a chance to really develop that. And I think across the American soccer landscape, there has been a recognition that there needs to be more infrastructure there to make sure players can get from point A to point B, right? Actually, at NWSL Media Day, Jessica Berman was telling us that this was probably going to be the league's next step, is developing that path from the youth games to the professional game, though she didn't have the specifics at the time. But I think you're also just noticing that across the landscape, period, right? You have Michelle Kang's big investment in US soccer a few months ago, which focuses on the women's programs and the youth programs at US soccer, including some grassroots stuff. Even to a lesser extent, you have Emma Hayes talking about making sure the lost generation of the USWNT never happens again and treating the under 23 team like a reserve team of sorts for the senior national team. So it really just feels like that's a big topic of conversation in this country for the game, and probably like the number one way to make sure the NWSL and American women's soccer period stays competitive with the rising programs around the world, like in Europe and elsewhere.
Yeah, Emma Hayes coming in as the US women's head coach has certainly set a tone now that we're now seeing the butterfly effect very, very quickly, where she's emphasized this for now and for the longevity of this team. And it seems like now the NWSL and subsequent other leagues are starting to take a hint that this is the way that we're moving forward. With the alleviation of the NWSL draft, the move toward more professional autonomy for professional soccer players, when we look at the landscape, and we have to dice this up a little bit in terms of where we've been and where we're going with NWSL. NWSL, they already have 8 teams that have had academies established. That's not the entire quorum for NWSL. Now, of those 8 teams that have had academies, with Portland Thorns leading the charge. Now, have the foresight in 2014 to establish an academy and then be followed subsequently by Washington Spirit. 2 teams that absolutely have been very big proponents for soccer. And you mentioned Michelle Kang. Now, as we look to this sort of establishing these lower division teams subsequent to that, and you see Bay FC getting involved, a recent expansion side, Kansas City Current, North Carolina Courage, who also did have an existing and do have an existing academy, Gotham FC in the same boat, Orlando Pride, Racing Louisville, Seattle Reign, and the Washington Spirit. What do you think that this looks like as this starts to go forward? I know that it hints a little bit of a more significant, substantial scouting network domestically, where we're going to have these resources in depth to be able to dig into. But what do you see as the big picture there for, where our heads are turning as soccer fans and also as soccer business?
Um, you really outlined that well. I think, right, the express purpose of this particular league is to make sure that players at the youth levels, be they in academies or maybe even players with experience in college, have a place where they can develop their skills, technically, tactically, before hitting the pros, right? We all know that's a really successful way to develop talent in professional sports. Um, so there's that. Just from like a nuts and bolts perspective, the first edition of this league will have 8 teams. They're going to play the classic double round robin style, 14 games in a season. They're going to have playoffs. The top four will make it. So that's what it'll look like. And then also they hope to have all the NWSL teams in by year 4. There will be invitations for unaffiliated teams to enter this league. So I think in theory, from a business perspective, there is the possibility of like a new type of NWSL expansion where maybe people are going to be interested in the Division 2 league because they have certain funding that would match that and not Division 1. That's something that we need to consider. In terms of a business of the business side in the application itself, they said, "Oh, we could use these Division 2 teams to try out creative marketing strategies." Um, but yeah, I think like the most immediate impact is the one that you said, this vast scouting network. We will have the ability to now track so many different types of players and offer so many different types of players opportunities to have careers in soccer, which is very exciting for anybody that who's passionate about this, and actually just straight up necessary for the success of this game in this country, the national team, outside of the national team. And we talk about this being one of the biggest countries in the world population wise. We have not scratched the surface yet on all of the potential professional players. This gets us closer to that for sure.
When you think about the success of women, especially US soccer, and how dominant they've been, the success of NWSL in this iteration, the athleticism, it's really exciting to see where this could move toward and how much bigger it can get, right? Like women have done so much historically with so little that now that there's the proper infrastructures being put into place, the funding, the consistent investment, the spotlight being shown, I think we're moving into something even greater. But with this, and I know when we jumped in, we did mention that this is in the application process. I have so many questions, Party. I want to know, like, will this follow like the NWSL CBA? Will they have the same level of autonomy? What will this look like going forward? Are there plans for subsequent lower divisions? How does this fully shape? Will there be new demands on potentially expansion sides for NWSL, the top division, in terms of implications of you must have this as part of it? Like this is a be all end all deal with the level of demand. Is there any inkling that we'll have any of those answers? Has NWSL been a little bit forthcoming, or are we still sort of in the shadowy areas and we're all just throwing confetti yet?
Probably the second one. But these are questions that I have, that I know lots of people have, that we're all going to try to get to the bottom to. I mean, all we have so far is an application. I assume that they'll need to have these answers at some point in the process anyway, to the people they actually have to answer to. But just in terms of having that requirement, it wouldn't surprise me if at a certain point any and expansion hopefuls for the NWSL current Division 1 league would need to do that, since the expectation is that if this league happens by year 4, all of the existing Division 1 teams will have Division 2 teams. So that part of it doesn't surprise me, and again, it really is a sign that everybody feels like focusing on the youth game, or focusing on that pathway to professional, is really a priority across the board.
I think it's interesting the way that the women's game has developed in the States in direct contrast to the way that the men's game has developed, because it seems like they had tried to do the inverse of this forward to varying degrees of success, whereas NWSL are doing this on the back end, tucking it in, having become one of the greatest, if not the greatest league globally. And I'm really, really interested to see the impact of how this sort of unfurls. Pardeep, this is amazing. Thank you for jumping ahead and getting this out first for us and waking us up bright and early with a bit of good news in terms of the women's game. Um, will we be hearing more about this, or be digging into any inkling of maybe speaking with the commission again sometime soon?
Um, the commissioner is generally, you know, I would say she's pretty good at answering questions at some point, so hopefully we hear from her soon. I do not have any promises myself, but, you know, hopefully she'll like to give us some answers.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Pardeep. Everyone, you heard it here first. Stay tuned for more as this continues to unfurl on Attacking Third. Thanks, gang.
Thank